Hello everyone, my name is Yangtian Li. I am a senior concept artist and illustrator. Today I'm here to share with you my process of creating this illustration. So I did the drafting before recording because the drafting was a lot of back and forth, and I just felt a bit better off camera doing all that, experimenting. But over here, I started by doing very finer details on her eyebrow. I know a lot of tutorials would tell you not to do this. However, the reason I did that was because this defines how thin my lines will be. And I can see that over here, if my thinnest lines are not pixelated, then chances are the rest of my illustration will be okay with this line width. Over here, I started to design her headpiece. I was referencing a lot of Turkish symbols, a lot of Turkish patterns. As you can see throughout the tutorial, I will be using a lot of the Symmetry Tool in Photoshop. You can see the icon that's on basically the middle of the screen that looks like a butterfly. A lot of patterns and a lot of decorative bits are all symmetrical, so the Symmetry Tool can really handy for all this. Usually after designing the piece with Symmetry Tool, I then warp the pattern or whatever into the locations that I wanted and having a bit of perspective on it, as you can see in the process. Then I just started adding more details to the decorative elements on her hat. I'm not sure what's it actually called, but let's say it's a headpiece. And yeah, the line work process is just going to be very long. And by the way, this is actually 12 times the speed of the original speed. So this just takes a long time. And so I speed up a lot just so I can show the process easier. I wanted her to be really fancy, as if this is like a ceremonial kind of situation where she's wearing really cool fancy clothes, and maybe it's more of a performance kind of situation where she's doing a sword dance, and so I don't need to worry about the functionality of the armor, and I just want to enjoy the designing the cool costume that looks good on her. Over here you can see again I pulled out the Symmetry Tool to design her belt. As you can see the sketch underneath, I wanted something that echoes the previous pattern shape, but also makes it a little bit different than the previous one. But I think after I sketched it out and warped it in place, I start to realize that it's looking too similar and the level of detail isn't the same with what's already on her headpiece. It looks too repetitive. I eventually decide to change it. But over here, again, I pulled out the Symmetry Tool. This time it was because it's really difficult to design the patterns on the shoulder pieces by itself, like piece by piece. So with the Symmetry Tool, I can actually design both of the shoulder piece at once, and I get a preview of that, and then I can just place the patterns on top. I also created this little dot brush while making all these little beads, because if I drew all the beads by myself, it's gonna take forever. So to do that, you simply need to just draw a circle, and then you go to edit and define brush preset. then you can just adjust the spacing to make the brush, or someone made it for you. But anyway, as you can see, after I finished designing the piece or sketching out the shoulder piece, I am able to draw the pattern itself onto the shoulder piece a lot easier. And it still requires some design, but the Symmetry Tool designing process has helped me speed up this process a lot more. And basically, I was able to sort of see where these patterns are needed and deciding where those patterns should be before I place it onto the actual shoulder piece in perspective. After a while, I tried to flip with my canvas and just to see how it's looking like from the other perspective. You get tired after a while looking at the same picture and you're losing your actual judgment, sort of say. So I flipped it over to check if everything is still working for me. And then I started sketching out the fabric, also trying to design those folds, making sure that it's sort of having a good ratio of being loose and also being tight at places where they need to be. And then over here, again, I brought out the Symmetry Tool, basically with any traditional patterns. Especially a lot of traditional patterns are symmetrical, so it's really, really handy to have that. But then after sketching out the initial or the major pattern with Symmetry Tool, if I continue to do that, it will look very mechanical. That's why after I sketched out the basic shape, I then just turned off the Symmetry Tool to add more details. And then the rest is obviously not symmetrical, and I just have to sketch them out by myself. And again, here comes my very handy beads brush. And yeah, whenever you can use a tool, just use a tool. Adding more details to her belt. And I was adjusting a lot of the width of her armor pieces just to make sure that it's repetitive enough, but also it has some variation. Adding more of those like floral elements that you see from traditional Turkish pattern designs. And then I start to add some thicker outlines to places where I feel like it needs to be grouped or it has to be punched out a little more to convey the idea of something as overlapping onto the other. And then her skirt, I wanted the fabric to be flowy, and to be honest, it's probably not the most functional design, but for this particular case, it's more about the illustration looking cool. So these folds are really there to help with the composition of the illustration. I wouldn't probably do exactly this kind of skirt if it was for costume design where the actress or the game model needs to walk around with a dress like that, because I will have different concerns. But for this illustration, it's a different scenario where every line should be serving this illustration. Like I only need to see this illustration, or maybe this is more of a design for like a figurine. So the character is not really moving. I just wanted the lines all to be there to serve this design as a 2D piece, if that makes sense. But yeah, so there is a difference between the illustration and, actual character design for games or actual costume design for film and TV. And adding more patterns and details on her shoes, because the shoulder piece, the waist piece is already super complicated. So I try to give this piece some resting areas by leaving the boots pretty bare, so you can actually focus on her face, her upper body a lot more. Then I started to sketching out her hand and still trying to work out a pose that's very elegant. Again, it's probably not gonna work if the way she's holding the sword, but in my mind, it's more of the idea of just a very elegant gesture. I just wanted the pose to look as elegant, and I wanted all the lines to sort of flow into each other. I wanted to design all the shapes so that the composition has these kind of flowy lines guiding your eyes around. And even with the sword, the shape of the sword should also be something there to guide your eye around the whole illustration. And I actually really struggled with the shape of her skirt for a while. I wanted to make sure that it somehow echoes the shape of her headpiece fabric, like the fabric that's behind her head. I wanted to be kind of mirroring each other, but in the end, I don't think it worked. And because it was too distracting, especially with the background that you will see maybe in the next video. But over here, eventually I start to thicken up the outline of the character, because before I added the background, I wanted to make sure that the character as a whole graphic will pop out from the background, just so that it's a very clear boundary between my character and the background. I do use the Photoshop stroke tool for emphasizing this outline, but at this stage, it's just it also looks more natural when I just sketch out the outline by myself. So yeah. Again, every line, it should all be working to serve the purpose of this illustration. It should always have some kind of connection with the others and make sure that they are sort of cohesive in its design.